Welcome back to Kings of the North. We're planning a road trip. Bill, we're planning a road trip. Is road trip, which I guess is one word, is it your favorite word in the English language behind bread?
I might put bread first, but road trip is up there. I will say though, like as I've gotten older, the road trips have become a little more difficult to endure. I used to be the guy that would drive from Columbus to Lincoln, Nebraska without giving it a second thought. And now I give it a second thought. I probably still do it, but I'll be a little more miserable at the end of it.
So I got you a bread scented candle for a late Christmas present. Now it makes me think I should get you a road trip scented candle, but
it smells like burnt rubber and gasoline.
And armpits. Wow, we have been in this car.
Sedan. Yeah.
Musty sedan. Oh, because I went to the candle store and you can mix all the flavors together. And it's like it's a very delicate process to get the 3 scents together to create musty sedan. But that's our goal, because we have created the ultimate northern schedule. Ultimate northern road trip. Bill and I, we have to decide if we're going to just like get in our cars and leave Columbus in August and like not come home. It frankly would save some driving. I did calculate the mileage. Or are we going out and back, out and back, out and back, out and back every week? So what we wanted to do is like just remind you guys, hey, like there's some great northern games coming up this college football season. There are also 2 byes this college football season. So we went through all 14 weeks. We picked the best northern game. There's a bonus week that has 2 games, and we tried to cover as many of our 26 northern teams as we could. We did a pretty good job, I think. We wanted to be representative, but we also wanted to make sure that like we were acknowledging the most important games. And like for real, I wouldn't mind going to at least a couple of them. Maybe trying to get Kings out on the road at least, if not 14 weeks out of the year, maybe 2 or 3.
I think that'll happen. Yeah, going to all these games, I think would be exceedingly difficult because the North is expansive. We're covering a lot of ground here geographically. It's not like we're just driving around. The heartland stretches from Pacific Northwest to Piscataway. It's a lot of ground to cover.
That was beautifully said. Pacific Northwest to Piscataway. That because they're going to have to like when the Big Ten does their new commercial. And they have.
I've been waiting for it. Yeah. Every time it comes up, I was like, "Oh, is this a new one?" And then it's never the new one. Yeah.
But from the Pacific to Piscataway is a really nice alliterative way to encapsulate what the Big Ten is doing here. So we did not hit everybody. We'll tell you at the end, like we're going to apologize to the schools that we didn't hit. But I did do a little bit of calculation, and let's see. We're looking at if we just get in the car and go, and we're just going from each of our games to the next game, we're not coming home in between, we're looking at about 11,359 miles for the fall. If we're trying to go out and back, we're looking at 23,000 miles. So that's 351 hours of driving. So if we split it up, I think we'll be okay.
Yeah. We're going to burn through our allotted mileage on our lease in one fall.
We'll and like that expense report would be like this week, 9,000 miles.
Jeez. Sorry, you expense $4,000 at Speedway gas stations.
I do love. I mean, what's the best part of a road trip is my wife's family was like that when she was a kid. She always said it was like, they're gonna drive, they're gonna maybe go stay like at a national park and that kind of thing. They're going to stay, so like maybe you're not spending a ton of money on the hotel or where you're staying, but you are blowing it out at the gas station. No limits. It's not a Funyuns or, it's a Funyuns and, right? That's a way to travel, isn't it?
Oh yeah, yeah. That's exploring the delicacies that our great country has to offer. There's no better place to do it than on a hot roller machine at a gas station.
So we are again. We're growing. We're getting to the road trip in a second. We're growing on Kings of the North. But in my past life, I did do a bracket with our listeners one time of like best gas station snacks. So when we get rolling on Kings of the North fully and we have a better way for everybody to correspond with us, we'll revisit best gas station snacks as part of our ultimate northern road trip. What we are not, I want us, by the way, we want to be a Funyuns and kind of company. We don't want to be Funyuns or. We're Funyuns and. We're not talking about labor practices today. And we know everything is happening, but I am just at the point, Bill, where I'm assuming that like we're heading towards a pay the players model. And I know there's going to be various things that pop up, and at times we will talk about them. And so like, since we last recorded, the Big Ten and the SEC came out and said, hey, we're getting together and we're going to lead the charge. And then the Dartmouth basketball players said, hey, we're going to form a union. And the National Labor Relations Board was said, that's a good idea, but I don't want to talk about it.
Neither do I. I kind of never want to talk about it. I understand that it comes with the territory, and at some point we'll have to talk about it. But especially the Big Ten SEC thing, it's like, that's cool. You're getting together. Let us know when you have something, and then we'll talk about that. Like you getting together, I don't think is worthy of much discussion. It's the results of this conversation that'll be interesting.
We know it's going to happen. So like, there's a part of me that's like, Dartmouth basketball players, Dartmouth in the north, it's in New Hampshire, saying we're going to form a union, and they say, okay. And then like, whatever, like, then it's like, well, what is it? I'm not trying to be like, but what's a Dartmouth basketball player worth? Now, I know they don't have athletic scholarships in the Ivy League, but there's a part of it. It's like, right, sometimes if you're a good athlete, it's like, well, you're going to get an academic scholarship. It's not a athletic scholarship or whatever. But it's like, one of the things the one thing I thought about this is, if we're going to put a value and figure out like what the employment parameters are for Dartmouth basketball, be careful. Because it might not be, I mean, for real. This is nothing against Dartmouth basketball. But if it's like, what's more important to society, a Dartmouth basketball player or a Starbucks barista, be careful.
That's not a battle I'd want to be in. Yeah.
No. All right. Let's do our ultimate northern road trip. Also, I want to acknowledge the opportunities that we're having and we want to have to go out and talk on other northern shows about other northern teams. So I've been on a Nebraska show. Shout out to those folks for having me on. I was on a great West Virginia show last week with Couz's Corner, and we talked a lot about West Virginia. And if you are watching this or listening to this because you are a fan of your own local northern team, whether it's Oregon or Wisconsin or Boston College or anybody, tell your local folk, hey, get these guys on, get Doug and Bill on, get them on to talk about the context of northern football. So we'll keep track. So shout out to West Virginia, shout out to Nebraska for having us on so far. The best game of week 1, August 31st, week 1 of the college football season, is undoubtedly Penn State at West Virginia. And Bill, we are talking playoff implications in week 1. Yes?
Absolutely we are. Did we decide last year? I couldn't remember. Did we call this the front yard brawl? Because Pitt, West Virginia is the backyard brawl.
We are definitely naming games. If we're going to your game, we're naming it. So front yard brawl, go for it, brother.
Yeah, I've seen some front yard brawls in my time. They're pretty entertaining. Yeah, this has tremendous playoff implications. It's going to be, the first chance we get to see what this new Penn State offense is going to look like with Andy Colton. You get to see Tom Allen as Penn State's defensive coordinator. And West Virginia, I think, is a team that's got a chance to win the Big 12. It is kind of funny. Like we went through this exercise, like you and I kind of went back and forth drafting almost the games. We wanted to make sure we landed on the ones that made the most sense. But every time we picked a game, and I was going back through before the show started, I was like, okay, we're picking this game, but like West Virginia's got an interesting game this week. And it happened like 7 times going through this exercise. But this is probably the most interesting West Virginia game. Penn State going to Morgantown in the first game of the year is going to be an absolute banger. Yeah.
I had this conversation on the West Virginia show I was on. We did our quarterback rankings in the North. We had Drew Aller 5th from Penn State. We had Garrett Green from West Virginia 9th. This game for sure, like we're drafted. You're drafted. Which guy you want in this game? Again, when we did the quarterback draft, we sort of immediately regretted where we placed Garrett Green. We thought he should be higher. Like, for your mortgage right now, pick a quarterback in this game. You taking Aller or Green?
I'm taking Green in this game.
Yeah. So we apologize for our immediately incorrect quarterback rankings, but this is like a really big deal and it's great history. The thing that I like about this, and there are multiple games like this that are like feeding into what we want to do here in the North, which is you're not in the same conference, but you are in the same region. You do share a culture and you've got to play. And there are games like this. We have another one coming up in week 2 that I love. They don't play every week. I mean, they don't play every year. We know that. Penn State and West Virginia between 1940 and 1992 played every year except for World War II stuff. because that's what they were. They were Northeastern college football powerhouses, and they played each other. And then Penn State joins the Big Ten, and you lose this. But they announced this series in 2013. This is one of those things where it's like when they announced the football series 10 years out, you're like, this is so stupid. Why did they? And then when you get 10 years later, you're like, yay, thanks for doing it. So in 2013, they said we're going to play in 23 and 24. It's awesome. Now, I'm not saying Penn State and West Virginia should play every year because they have responsibilities to their conferences. But I think I am saying that Penn State and West Virginia should play twice a decade. Like, you've got to, I think, as much as you want to be expansive in your non-conference games and go out and challenge people around the country, and we want to see Northern teams play Southern teams, I also think for certain schools, there are regional rivalries that you don't want to let fall off for 30 years. Yeah. You want to let a generation be aware of it. So I would dedicate myself to Penn State, West Virginia, a home and home every decade.
I think I would do that too. Like, I like the triangle there of Penn State, Pitt, West Virginia, which I think are all probably within. Penn State's about 2 hours from Pitt. I think Morgantown's about an hour from Pittsburgh. So Morgantown's probably 3 or 4 hours from State College. Like, all three of those teams, I think, should play each other more often than they do. Penn State and Pitt have like a tremendous rivalry going back decades, but that has been dead for a while. I'd like to see that renewed, not every year, and I'd love to see West Virginia and Pitt play. Yeah, like once a decade sounds right. Like, go out of your way to make sure you're setting aside some time for that game to be played more regularly than it has been.
So we're trying to figure out exactly what our plan's going to be with post-game shows and stuff within the season. I really want to go to this game. Like, I just want to like be there to experience this because, again, we think it's. I had both Penn State and West Virginia in my first 12-team playoff. You did not have West Virginia. You did have Penn State. But like, how many games do you have? Right? I mean, like, Texas, Michigan is a September game. Michigan, USC is a September game. This is as good as any September game you will find. So it is a week one banger, and we want to be there.
Yeah, and I think like part of what we want to do when we do go on the road for these games is introduce people to some of the unique Northern football cultures. And I don't know if it gets more unique than Morgantown, West Virginia. Yeah. So that makes it all the more important.
When I was on the West Virginia show, that host is actually situated in Southern West Virginia, and he has a bit of a Southern accent. And he was like, how do you decide what's North? Like, there are people who are in West Virginia who consider themselves in the Southern part of the country. And even down there in the Southern part of West Virginia, I said, do you own a snow shovel? And he said, yes. I said, then you're in the North. So like, this is, I could see us doing spot checks. I don't know if there's a way to do. Matt Brown is one of our new colleagues here in our growing empire, is really good at Freedom of Information Act requests. I don't know if you could do something with every major college football program in the country to find out how many snow shovels each university bought in the previous year, or how many you own a snow shovel tracker. But that certainly would help us. And listen, man, in Morgantown, you better have some shovels.
Yeah, you just get with the like the public works department of each university and ask them how many snowplows they have.
Yeah. Okay. You'll do that.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's 134 teams.
What's the threshold though? Is it like we have because it snows here every decade, once a decade, or do you have to have like at least double-digit snowplows in your arsenal to be considered?
I think we gather the snowplow information and then we figure out where the line is. But do they have any snowplows in Tuscaloosa, Alabama?
I doubt it. Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Is LSU investing in snowplows? Probably not. Week 2. The River City rivalry. I guess that's the name of this thing. But we want to be on a boat. So this is Pitt at Cincinnati. And this was a rivalry once upon a time when they were both in the Big East, but it's not like a super historic rivalry. They played for the Paddle Wheel Trophy for a while. They did not play for the Paddle Wheel Trophy last year because it's a 95-pound trophy. So we have to A, find it, and B, resurrect it. We want this to be a rivalry. I did look into this. I Googled cruises from Pittsburgh to Cincinnati. Because don't you see the ads sometimes for river cruises through Germany?
Yes.
Are you interested in like a river cruise?
I am, and I've gone down this road too. I've jumped into the American river cruise rabbit hole and studied extensively the opportunities along the Ohio River.
For real? What? Because I did not find great ones. I did find one that wouldn't help us for this game necessarily, but in May 2025, there is a river cruise from this one. Actually, I think it's from Cincinnati to Pittsburgh, but it's 8 days and it costs $4,400 a person.
How long is the cruise? Pittsburgh and Cincinnati aren't that far apart.
It's like 270 miles. It takes more than a week. You're going like 30 miles a day. I don't know if you're paddling. I don't know. You're stopping in multiple spots in ports of call in West Virginia. I didn't know there were that many places that you would want to stop, but I'm looking really more for like a guy with a boat who will just take us from Pittsburgh to Cincinnati in September of 2024. So if you know somebody who would do that, let us know. But you're up for the river cruise. You and the wife and the baby out on the river, the Ohio River.
Yeah, cruises on like open ocean terrify me. I don't think I could ever do that. But I'm okay on a boat on the river when I can see the shore and convince myself that I can swim there if anything goes awry.
Yeah. So I would like this rivalry to lean. So like it's not a guaranteed rivalry, right? Because this is ACC and Big 12, which again is like nuts. This is the kind of thing of like sometimes we're just going to drop. If you have somebody who says like, what's this Kings of the North thing? Kings of the North makes so much more sense to talk about Pitt and Cincinnati together. That makes more sense than Pitt is in the ACC with Duke and Wake Forest and Florida State, and Cincinnati is in the Big 12 with TCU and Arizona, right? They're nuts. We're not nuts. This makes sense. Pitt and Cincinnati, we should talk about them together. The Red River rivalry, like Oklahoma, Texas, they have a name for that. The Red River is like a trickle.
Yeah.
The Red River is like pouring out a bottle of water and like as a river. The Red River, which has an entire rivalry name for it, is 15th in America in discharge. And I was trying to look up river discharge because if you're not careful, it can sound a little weird. But it's just like the volume of water. It's not the length of the river. It's the volume of water. So the Red River is 15th. They get a whole big rivalry. The Ohio River is 3rd behind the Mississippi and the St. Lawrence. I would like to, rather than just the River City rivalry, I would like to lean into the Ohio River part of this because the Ohio River is even a little bit of a boundary for the North, like in some ways, it cuts around. We're taking West Virginia, but like, you know what I mean? Like, let's make this a thing again. And again, their cross conference, I'm interested in Pitt and Cincinnati trying to play each other at least twice a decade, and let's lean into some kind of Ohio River rivalry, not just a river. Like, tell them what river. Can we do this?
We can do this. So I'm looking at. So this is on American Cruise Lines. We can do it this summer if you want.
Okay.
June 28th, 2024. The Grand Ohio River Cruise. Now it's not strictly Pittsburgh to Cincinnati.
Okay.
But it starts in Pittsburgh, takes you through Moundsville, West Virginia, Marietta, Ohio, Marysville, Kentucky, and then you're in Cincinnati on day 7. And that's only half of the trip. This is a 16-day cruise from Pittsburgh to St. Louis. Why it takes 16 days, I have no idea. But it's like on like an old timey riverboat.
So listen. So there are multiple universities. We know Ohio State does it. I'm sure other universities do, where they have a cruise out on an ocean or a gulf, at least, for fans of a football program. Come onto this cruise and we'll talk about our football team for 3 or 4 days. This is what KOTN, again, all the goals we have down the line, the KOTN Midwestern Northern River Cruise, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And if it's 16 days, we'll talk about 8 different position groups for Pitt and 8 different position groups for Cincinnati. And it's like, it's day 7. It's the Cincinnati Safeties Day here on the Kings of the North River Cruise. We also could do the Cyhawk game this weekend. We're not. Cyhawk, great rivalry. Iowa State. Iowa leads that rivalry 47-23. It's also week 2. They didn't play at all between 1934 and 1977, but since then they've played every year except for the COVID year. And Iowa State are the example for every other rivalry where you're not in the same conference. So like every time, like there's no excuse for Oregon State. There's no excuse for Washington State. Look what Iowa and Iowa State have done. They've prioritized it. It matters to the state. And so we're acknowledging that we could do Iowa State this weekend, but we're picking Pittsburgh, Cincinnati. Are you totally okay with that?
Yeah, I'm okay with it because like the outside of the show, I feel like this is a game we talked about, right? Is like,
yeah,
we're doing this show because of games like this. So I'm okay with prioritizing this game over what is probably going to be a better game between Iowa and Iowa State, and a much more impactful game in the grand scheme of college football between Iowa and Iowa State. But we're trying to have some fun here too, and we want to go on a boat, so we're doing this. I
don't think there's. I guess the Mississippi River goes right there by Iowa too. So anyway, boats priority. Sorry, Cy-Hawk. We'll get there. Week 3, this is where it's at. This is the defining. This is what we're all about. I really want to be here. Alabama at Wisconsin. It is Alabama's first trip north, as we covered in the Nick Saban retirement show, and then talked about that later, like again in the fallout of Nick Saban's retirement from Alabama. Alabama has not come north for a regular season college football game since going to Penn State in 2011, and they were like, we're done with that. And then in 2019, Alabama started making these games, and they made this Wisconsin game, and Nick Saban said matchups like this are so important to the health of college football. And then he was like, but I'm not going to play it.
See you later.
Out.
Hope you all enjoy it.
So, like, this is huge. I cannot wait to see Alabama fans in Madison, Wisconsin. Now, listen, it's going to be October 14th. It's not going to be 16 degrees.
September 14th.
Excuse me, September 14th. It's not going to be 16 degrees, but like, isn't it going to be awesome? Like, it's going to be awesome. Yeah. I want to be there.
It's going to be fantastic. And I think, like, you and I have been to Madison. Madison is like one of the best college towns in America. And I feel like it's probably a secret to a lot of the people who like aren't in the Big Ten footprint. So I'm excited for Alabama fans to get up there and see what Madison's all about. It's going to be rowdy. What do we think? Do you think it's going to be a night game?
I've no idea. I mean, it's a Wisconsin home game, so that means it's like Wisconsin's TV deal, and Fox might want to plop this baby right on Big Noon. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess they could do that. Either way, it's going to be an incredible atmosphere because Wisconsin fans will show up regardless of what time this game is.
It also like that CBS with its historical ties to the SEC might be champing at the bit to put this at 3:30. And frankly, NBC at 8 o'clock. They have this draft. They're going to figure all this stuff out. Everybody's going to want this game.
Yes,
all the networks.
Yeah.
All the networks. Want it.
Yeah. And it's going to. It's good football too. I think. Right. It's like Alabama's fascinating with the transition they're going through, and Luke Fickell trying to build something at Wisconsin. Like, what a feather in the cap this would be if he can beat Alabama in his second year as Wisconsin's head coach. So there's layers to this one, but I think the attraction is just watching Alabama and Wisconsin fans kind of commingle for a few hours, because I think that could be exciting.
This doesn't happen. Alabama and Wisconsin have played twice before. They played in 1928 in Madison, and they played in 2015 in one of those neutral site games that Bama used to specialize in at Jerry World in outside Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
The current SEC teams going to Madison, Wisconsin: Alabama in 1928, Auburn in 1931, LSU in 1971, and this more than 50 years. So we will get that. I will do that research this offseason. SEC teams coming north, the history of that at all. I really would like to be there for this. And this is by far the best game this week because it's something we'll talk about in a couple of weeks. The Big Ten screwed some stuff up. So there are things that should be happening that aren't happening, but this is awesome. I'm glad Alabama scheduled it. Again, as we've talked about, they have a lot of these series coming up if they keep them. West Virginia, Notre Dame, Ohio State. I hope they all stay on the future schedule, but at the very least, we're getting Bama people. I want to just put one picture of a Bama person and Cheesehead.
Are we getting this is also the week we're getting the Civil War in the Apple Cup, or no?
So they are playing those. I don't know if they're both this week. This week 3. Let me check. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff that we like. Thank goodness. Congratulations to everybody for making sure that Oregon and Oregon State do play each other, and for making sure that Washington and Washington State play each other. But we can't get to all of them. This is like the number one game of the season to me. almost.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
I was willing to throw away everything else to make sure that we got to Alabama at Wisconsin. So I can't get it to come up right now. But yeah.
No, I think they are that week. And also too, that week
September
is
September 14th is the Apple Cup. Yeah.
yeah.
This weekend. Yep.
Utah and Utah State also play that week. The Battle of the Brothers is the first time they're playing since 2015. Again, like I think we're right with this pick here of Alabama at Wisconsin, but it's a pretty nice northern schedule that particular week, and there's a bevy of options to choose from.
Yeah. All right, so let's go to week 4. And by the way, as you'll notice, week 2 we didn't talk about this, so because we're so dedicated. We're so dedicated in week 2 to Pitt at Cincinnati at all costs. We're skipping Texas at Michigan in week 2.
Oh, yeah.
And we're also skipping USC Michigan in week 4. We will get to Michigan. But like there's too many good Northern games. Week 4, we are doing Floyd of Rosedale because you want to see a pig up close. It's Iowa at Minnesota. This was your call. I think it's the right call, but we have to acknowledge, as much as we love the cross-country games, we have to acknowledge the traditional rivalries here in the North that matter. This is one of them.
Yeah, they're playing for a pig trophy, man. Like I'm showing up for that all the 10 times out of 10. I don't care who else is playing that week. Maybe if they ever move like Ohio State, Michigan, maybe I consider not going to watch the game for the pig trophy. But until that happens, I'm going to the pig trophy game. It's like a big. This feels to me like a very important season for PJ Fleck. Am I off on that? Like he's been very good at Minnesota. They had a little bit of a rough year last year. I don't know that you can afford like another rough year. So this is like a big early test for them. And like Iowa is going to be interesting with their changing offense. And it's just a classic Big Ten West rivalry that plays for a fun trophy. And we want to celebrate those kind of games.
So when the Big Ten announced the rivalries they were going to protect in this new world, they're protecting 12 and 3 of them involve Iowa. And I initially was like, what are we like? What? Yeah, gosh. Oh, you got to protect Iowa. But actually I've come around on this because again, I'm just so very interested in this new world where you're not going to have division titles to play for within a conference, where you're losing a lot of the traditional stuff. How do you define success? Right. And I think it's hard to just define success of like win 7 games or win 9 games, or because for like, sure, the 12-team playoff is going to give more programs opportunities, but there's still a lot of programs where like 12-team playoff is pie in the sky. So how do you define success? And rivalries are a great way to do that. So when you think about Iowa's schedule, Iowa, the Big Ten, it retained Iowa, Minnesota, Floyd of Rosedale. It retained Iowa, Nebraska for that new Heroes Trophy. Since Nebraska came in, it's like, that's sort of the whole point of Nebraska joining the Big Ten is for Nebraska to play Iowa every year. So I totally get that. And then Iowa, Wisconsin is another longtime rivalry. So they protected all 3 of those. Plus Iowa plays Iowa State every year. So a third of Iowa's schedule is rivalry games. That's actually awesome. I don't know why I initially was like mad about that. They just have more rivalries that exist. And when we've lost so much, I think protecting them is good. And so Minnesota also had its Paul Bunyan Axe rivalry with Wisconsin protected. So Minnesota has 2 protected rivalries. Minnesota and Michigan, the Little Brown Jug, was not protected. But like I'm glad about this, man. And we'll talk about these. There's, the ACC protected some rivalry games. The Big 12 protected some rivalry games in the new world, but the Big 10 protected more than anybody. And I think it was the right move.
I think it was too. It would be a bummer to lose. Some of them's like whatever. Like I don't need to watch the Land Grant Trophy game, and I'm kind of okay with the Brown Jug as well, kind of going away. But like games like this, I think need to be preserved.
Yeah, 12-10 last year. Kirk Ferentz is still mad about it. Minnesota won because the Cooper DeJean punt return for a touchdown was taken away because they said he waved for a fair catch when he didn't mean to wave for a fair catch. He pointed, but it'll be good. It's a rivalry game. Plus, people are still mad. Week 5. This was tough. This was changed from our initial one, but this is Louisville at Notre Dame is our week 5 game. And one of the issues is like, if we're doing this Northern thing, like you kind of got to get to Notre Dame. Notre Dame does not have a great schedule this year. Like there are times when you looked at Notre Dame's schedule last year and going into the season and trying to figure out like who's contending for a 4-team playoff. And Notre Dame was playing Ohio State, USC, and Clemson, who going into last season, like, I don't know, those are 4 of the best 7 teams and 3 of the best 7 teams in the country. The 2 home games for Notre Dame this year that kind of are of interest are Louisville this week and then Florida State in November. They play at USC. They play at Texas A&M. They play at Purdue. There's just some of their ACC games don't have as much juice. They have like a Georgia Tech game in there. So we didn't initially have Notre Dame at all on our initial schedule. And you were kind of like, so we flipped the game to get here. I think we need to be in South Bend in the first year of our road trip.
Yeah, I think we do too. And the Florida State week, I think there's there's another big one, the week that Notre Dame hosts Florida State that we'll talk about later on. So like that kind of got preempted by that game. And this is really like the only other game where it makes sense to go to South Bend, to your point. I also like, I have Notre Dame as a playoff team, and I'm probably too high on Notre Dame at the moment. Part of it's the schedule, but I think they're one of the more interesting teams in college football. Like this is a good early test for them. They open with Texas A&M, which is another good test, but I don't really know how good A&M is going to be as they go through a coaching change. This game against Louisville kind of feels like a pivot point in the schedule a little bit. Like, are you going to be for real or not for Notre Dame? Because last year it felt like, they played Ohio State tough, and then maybe they were going to kind of take off from there and be a team that makes a college football playoff. And they kind of sputtered a little bit after that Ohio State game. I want to see Marcus Freeman like show that he has the chops to get Notre Dame to the college football playoff. And I think this is a game you have to win to do that.
The game I originally had for this week, just because it almost chokes me up. It sounds like a Woody Guthrie song. From the Pacific to Piscataway, it is the Big Ten. They do it their way. From the Pacific to Piscataway is this week. It's Washington at Rutgers. And I thought we could fly to Washington and then drive to Rutgers, 3,800 miles or whatever it is. So I had that originally just because so we'll talk about that this week. It is the encapsulation of the ludicrousity of ludicrosity of conference expansion. From Seattle to New Brunswick. They're in the same conference, right? So like we could have illustrated that, and we will, but we picked this game instead. And also, by the way, we don't acknowledge this. We don't acknowledge it. This week is also Georgia at Bama. So I don't know that the world will be talking about Washington at Rutgers this week, but we will be. And we will be talking about Louisville at Notre Dame because that's our best one. And you kind of got to get to South Bend if you're going to do a Northern show. All right, week 6. What's happening? Oh, it's a national title rematch. Michigan at Wisconsin at Washington. This also eliminated us when I have Washington at Rutgers, like we're doing Washington back-to-back weeks. Michigan at Washington. Both quarterbacks, both head coaches gone, right? Like this, it's Kalen DeBoer and Michael Penix against Jim Harbaugh and JJ McCarthy. And now it's Jed Fish and Will Rogers against Sharon Moore and Alex Orji. And that's the nature of college football. But man, we got to be here. But holy moly, that's what everyone's going to be talking about. Again, Washington had so many old guys. Michigan had so many guys who stayed for one more year. Now we're headed to the NFL. This also, by the way, I think my beating the drum about like, please acknowledge that Michigan's national title was based on talent. I saw mock like JJ McCarthy is going to wind up going in the first round.
I know
of the NFL draft. I saw a mock draft the other day that had Roman Wilson in the first round, the Michigan receiver.
He had a great Senior Bowl week. Yeah.
And then you are going to have guys like their offensive line and some of their defense, like they are just going to have a wave of dudes on day 2. So I think that debate, if you're on the other side of that, you're wrong. Michigan was super talented, but it's going to be stark, man.
Yeah.
As we get to week 6 of the season, how much both of these programs have changed.
Have you taken a gander yet this week at Bill Connolly's returning production stats that he put out on ESPN? So he ranked all 134 FBS teams by percentage of returning production. Number 128 is Michigan, and number 130 is Washington.
Are you serious? Okay. I mean, it's how you do it. So like the thing of it is like they did it. They peaked. They built something and they peaked. But Michigan is going to have more guys who didn't play last year who are ready to step up and play. Washington's going to feel it more.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah,
and they're going to feel it even if Kalen DeBoer stayed. They were really primed for 1 year.
Yeah.
The thing that I want to complain about here is that the Big Ten has no sense of spectacle. I thought when it was like they're adding 4 West Coast teams, they've transformed the very face of college football. And there is absolutely no rollout. It is just scattered randomness to introduce the world to the idea that USC, UCLA, Oregon, and Washington are now in the Big Ten. These are the first Big Ten games for each of the 4 new Big Ten teams. The first one for Washington is they host Northwestern in week 4. The first one for Oregon is the first Big Ten game for Oregon is at UCLA in week 5. Like, there's nothing to it. Like, there's no rollout. And then there's USC at Michigan in week 4 is USC's first Big Ten game. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
The very, very first, the inaugural Big Ten game for any of the new West Coast teams is Indiana at UCLA on September 14th. And so I was envisioning a world where it's like the new world is here and there's a double header. And I thought it would be like one of the West Coast teams at Michigan and then Ohio State at another of the West Coast teams. And they build it up all day. They own the day, whether it's week 3, week 4. Maybe they have all 4 of those West Coast teams lined up in all these different slots they have, right? Have a noon game, have a 3:30 game, have an 8 o'clock game, and have an 11 o'clock game. And it's like the new world. And they didn't do any of it. They just made a schedule. So like, this is a huge deal, Michigan at Washington. But I would have I don't know. It's too late, but they blew it. It's awful. Where is the pageantry? Like, roll this out, own the moment. And now the transformation of college football as we know it. Indiana at UCLA, Kurt Cignetti, Chip Kelly, or maybe not Chip Kelly because he doesn't want to be there anymore. The Hoosiers, the Bruins, they're good at basketball. They're not good at football, but they're the first time we're doing this.
Hey, they should just play a basketball game in the Rose Bowl instead.
Although both basketball programs are having horrible years too, right?
Yeah, that's true. That is true.
Oh my God. It's just, shouldn't they have rolled this out better?
Yeah, I think we are getting a version of that. I think the next week, right? Where we'll talk about that in a second. But yes, I think it like some kind of showcase of the best 4 teams of the old Big Ten against these 4 new teams would have been fantastic.
Yeah. And there's no, you can do whatever you want with the schedule. They could have figured it out. They chose not to because they have no sense of pizzazz.
You could have done it all in week 1, right? Like the Big Ten is playing conference games in week 1, right? You could do one on a Friday night, play 2 on Saturday, maybe play 1 on Sunday or play 1 on Labor Day.
Did they call you? Did they call me? Did they ask? What are they doing? Horrible. Blew it. Absolutely blew it. Forget it. We're not doing the road trip. They blew it. Week 7, banger. Ohio State at Oregon. This is huge. I've already said I think it's possible that Ohio State and Oregon wind up playing 3 times this season. This game, the Big Ten championship game, and maybe again in the playoff. Ohio State leads this series 9-1, but Oregon won the last one in Columbus in 2021. They had a series scheduled for 20 and 2021. The 20 game was canceled by COVID. That was the trip to Eugene. And so they're like, hey, we got to figure this out. And they did another home and home scheduled for 2032 and 2033. And then they just said, just be in our conference. So now it's here, but this is going to be great.
It's going to be awesome. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this one. I think we'll probably end up at this game if I had to guess. I would be, even if it's for on my end doing more Ohio State stuff. I would be surprised if we're not here. Desperately want to get to Eugene. It's near the very top of the list of places I've never been that I would like to go to see a game. And these are on the what's the short list of teams I think that people think are national championship contenders going into this year. It's Ohio State, Georgia, and probably like some separation, but I think maybe the next team there is Oregon, right?
Yeah, for
a lot of people. So this is I'm with you that Oregon and Ohio State might end up playing 3 times this year. I kind of hope it doesn't happen that way, but I think it's certainly possible. this is going to be an incredible game. Two of the very best teams in college football, and like the last time they played, Oregon upset Ohio State in the shoe. Dan Lanning was not there for that, but Ryan Day took one of the probably more difficult to take losses of his career. He doesn't have that many, but it was one that I don't think people were expecting Ohio State to take. They got kind of embarrassed in that game, and I'm sure he still holds on to that, so that's a factor here too. But it's just great. It would have been nice to see this one, first Saturday night of the season maybe, but we'll do it in week 7 instead.
So this will be good because this will be a test of the let them lose theory that we are entering into in a 12-team playoff world, where this will not be punitive for the loser. Nobody's going to walk out of this game being like, well, that's it. Their season's done. But that's not affecting our anticipation of the game, is it? And it's going to be quite a boost for the winner. And I think people are going to be jacked up going into it. And I'm expecting high quality football. So this will be it's a good test run. And again, like Texas, Michigan, which we're not going to, is another great test run of that, of like, do you have a week 2 game where you have to feel like someone's had their season ruined in September if they lose? So no one's season's going to be ruined, but I think we're going to see some great football.
Yeah, I think so too. So this is the week we get USC Penn State this week too.
Okay.
And we get Washington, Iowa this week. So we were one game away. We were like a UCLA, Michigan away from having what we were asking for just in the middle of the year instead of week 1.
All right. So that's a big week 7. We are halfway through our ultimate Northern football schedule. We will take a quick break, and when we come back, probably our least exciting game. But then there's a super cool thing because we're going to do it a doubleheader week. We'll do that next on Kings of the North. Back with the ultimate Northern schedule, Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis. If you're listening to us on a podcast, you found us. Wonderful. Thanks for doing that. If you're watching on YouTube, or if you're listening to a podcast and you don't know about YouTube, or, our faces matter. YouTube, it's at KOTNCFB on YouTube. So again, like we're building up. We're doing twice a week right now. We have a show coming up on Thursday. The plan is to talk about Northern college football players in the Super Bowl. And I, of course, have stats about how many guys who will be playing in the Super Bowl are from the North as compared to not from the North. But we want to talk about some of the interesting stories of some of those guys who got to the Super Bowl. So we definitely will be talking about George Kittle, Iowa tight end, now with the San Francisco 49ers. Definitely talking about Isaiah Pacheco, Rutgers running back, now with the Kansas City Chiefs, and a couple other guys as well. And so we would invite you to join us there on that Thursday, Kings of the North. Let's get back to the ultimate schedule. Bill, you picked the even weeks. I picked the odd weeks. This is week 8. This was a little tough. So we got an interesting one, but it's not quite as glamorous as a lot of the other weeks. It's Nebraska at Indiana.
Yeah.
Indiana actually leads this series 10-9, but like Matt Rule at Nebraska and Kurt Cignetti at Indiana, Rule in year 2, Cignetti in year 1, are like pretty important to the future of the Big Ten. So I like this.
Yeah, that's most of the reason I picked it because this week is not particularly great. But I do think that Rule versus Cignetti kind of storyline is interesting. I think I don't know. I won't speak for you. Like, I kind of believe in what Matt Rule is building at Nebraska, and I'm really interested in see it playing out. And like, Kurt Cignetti has been a really successful head coach everywhere he's been, and now he's taking on this new challenge of doing it at Indiana, and doing it in the Big Ten. And I don't know that there's any guarantee that that'll work, but I think it'll be interesting. Watch him trying to kind of get it off the ground. And this is this feels like a spot for Kurt Cignetti where like I'm not expecting Indiana to go out in his first season and beat a Big Ten power, but beating like what I consider to be a somewhat rising Nebraska program at home, I think would be a really nice win for Kurt Cignetti if he were able to get it, kind of regardless of how the rest of the season goes. It would almost feel like a little bit of proof of concept for me in his first year. So I do think this game is interesting. It's not tremendously impactful to the national conversation, the playoff race, but I think in terms of like the lower tiers of Northern football, I guess, like kind of solidifying itself, this does feel like an important game to me.
Also, we don't acknowledge this, but Georgia is at Texas this week. So again, this is the Georgia versus Texas of the North. It's Nebraska at Indiana. It's just kind of a weird week where there's.
You know what we do get this week?
What do
we get the 2 California schools going to Rutgers and Maryland this week.
Yeah. So that's like fun. If we wanted to, we could do like if those games are far enough apart, we could go and like go to the one and then watch it and then drive to the other one between Maryland and Rutgers and watch 2 California schools play on the East Coast. So again, representative of the new world. So this is week 8, but again, like we're intrigued by Indiana. We are, and getting to Bloomington, great. We'll go to Bloomington and we'll get a little clash of the shades of red here between Indiana and Nebraska. All right. Week 9 double header. There is a Thursday night game that is going to allow us to do 2 games this week. And that Thursday night game is Syracuse at Pitt. And I love this. I am all about this. I'm trying to make sure I get this right. Pitt is the team that Syracuse has played the most in its history. And Pitt has only played, I believe this is right, West Virginia and Penn State more than it has played Syracuse. So like Pitt, Syracuse matters. And when the ACC expanded to a gazillion teams, the ACC, in case you didn't know, is going to be 17 teams this year. They're adding SMU, Cal, and Stanford, which is, if you think what's going on in the North is nuts, go check that out. But among the rivalries they are protecting, I think it's like double-digit rivalries they protected, but they did protect all the ACC Northern rivalries. So Boston College Syracuse, Boston College Pitt, and Syracuse Pitt will be played every year in this new 17-team ACC, and that's really important. And we're in a position here, man, where like Kyle McCord, Ohio State transfer at quarterback for Syracuse, and Eli Holstein, Alabama transfer, who might win the starting job at Pittsburgh. That again is a nice. It's the Alabama quarterback versus the Ohio State quarterback. Yeah. In a Northern ACC showdown. That's also representative of the new college football world.
Yeah, I think this will be a fun game. I think I'm excited to see. I'm excited to see both these programs kind of face off, but I also think, I think I feel a little better about where Syracuse is right now than Pitt, based off how last year went and kind of the juice that Fran Brown has. So like this is a national spotlight for Fran Brown to kind of show what he's all about at Syracuse, and maybe for Kyle McCord to remind people why he was one time Ohio State's starting quarterback. So I'm glad that this game got protected too. Like it would be a bummer that those 3 Northern ACC teams that you mentioned were not playing each other every year, and we had to like watch Syracuse play Georgia Tech instead of Syracuse playing Pitt or Syracuse playing Boston College. So shout out to the ACC for doing that. But this is like again, like similar to Pitt Cincinnati. Like this is the kind of game that we're here for, not necessarily the rest of college football, but we're going to get them interested in it.
You want to go to this? Like this we can really go to. Drive over on Thursday and go to the game.
Yeah.
I think we'll really be there.
Yeah.
Saturday, week 9, second part of the doubleheader. It's Michigan State at Michigan. And this is fascinating because both programs have new coaches, Sharon Moore at Michigan, Jonathan Smith at Michigan State. And I think actually, when you think about a modern college football rivalry, I think it gets underrated because Ohio State, Michigan is such a big deal, but they played 116 times. Between 2002 and 2007, Michigan won 6 straight. And then between 2008 and 2011, Michigan State won 4 straight. And since then, it's 6-6. So this is like when you think about Ohio State, Michigan, it has not been, it's been dominated. It has not been back and forth. 6-6 since 2012. Can little brother Michigan State, which was drubbing Michigan for a while, rise back up under this new era? And can Michigan, which has won 2 straight, maintain this? And you even think back to Michigan's been on a remarkable 3-year run, right? 3 straight playoff appearances, 3 straight Big Ten titles, 3 straight wins over Ohio State. You know what? They don't have 3 straight wins over Michigan State because in 2021, Michigan State was the last team to beat Michigan in the regular season.
Yeah.
Like, this is baller, man. Let's do this. Like, of course we know this, but also this is an excellent competitive modern rivalry. I mean, it's old as traditional, but like it's as competitive, I think, as any modern rivalry. Because 6-6 in 12 years is, frankly, I think, like what you're looking for.
It's chippy too, right? Like there's I would maybe I won't say that, but there's a lot of vitriol here between these two teams that I don't know that if you're not in the rivalry or like, you know, in its proximity like we are, that you realize. But obviously there was a stuff in the tunnel a couple of years ago in Ann Arbor. But even like last year, right? Didn't Michigan like punch in a touchdown with like no time left and they were already winning? Was it 42-0? And they scored late anyway because they could. Like that kind of stuff happens in this rivalry, and it's going through a reset on both sides too. So it's like it's a chance for Sharon Moore to show that he is capable of maintaining Michigan's winning streak in this rivalry, and it's a chance for Jonathan Smith to bounce it back in Michigan State's favor and show that Michigan State is ready to be a much better program than it's been the last couple of years.
So again, like we're like Michigan's home schedule like is just awesome, right? So we acknowledge like we're a little slow on the draw getting Ann Arbor. Of course, you must be in Ann Arbor at least once if you're going to be a Northern college football show. But we knew this one was coming, and there were just some things to kind of get in the way a little bit of like some of the plans to maybe see them in some of their early awesome games. Michigan plays an awesome schedule this year. It's awesome. Like a world where you just tell a Michigan fan you're playing Texas, USC, and Ohio State, like that's tremendous. And so it's going to be really challenging. And I think like Michigan fans are going to have to get their head wrapped around the idea that, you know, after three, they've lost 3 total games the last 3 years under Jim Harbaugh.
Yeah.
Michigan could easily lose 3 this year and still be a very good football team and still potentially be a playoff team. But you're just going to have to gird yourself a little bit because the schedule's that tough.
Yeah. And it almost like this is, I don't know what Michigan fans are expecting from Sharon Moore. Like if they're being reasonable and realistic and like knowing that like this is going to be perhaps a tough season or like a little bit of a transition year, you're going to lose a little bit of your dominance. And if that happens, then I think like obviously the Ohio State Michigan game is huge, but like then this becomes sort of like the marker of that season. Like if Michigan ends up not, you know, winning any of the games it has against the West Coast teams, or like it loses to Texas or whatever, and it finishes like a 8-4 kind of season that has them outside of the playoff, then like it's like, okay, what did Sharon Moore do against Michigan State? And I think that becomes like a key point of his first year in Ann Arbor.
So some other good games this week. They're border schools for us, and by the time we get to the season, we may have adopted them. But Kansas State is also this week, so which is sweet rivalry. So they're not in the North yet, but they might be. Week 10, let's do it. Great one. Ohio State at Penn State, and this is November 2nd. It's Halloween weekend. Halloween is on Thursday, and this should be officially a Halloween game when they play. 7 of the last 12 years has been a Halloween game, but like they haven't completely leaned into it. But with Ohio State, Michigan placed squarely on the last weekend of the regular season, which is where it is and where it should be forever. I love this idea of like this game, whenever it is played, I think should be the last weekend in October / first weekend in November. So, when we talk about Ohio State, Penn State, are you in on Halloween game every time they play?
Yeah, that's sort of what I've become accustomed to. I know the one year they played it late November. They played the week before the Ohio State Michigan game.
Yep.
And I think last year was it like the week before Halloween? Maybe I think Ohio State played Wisconsin on Halloween weekend, right? Yeah. So no, I think I like, and I get like it's harder when you're putting the schedules together. But if you can find a regular weekend to play like a mid-season rivalry game, which I think this has become, then I think you should do that. Yeah.
So the other thing is, it is not a protected rivalry in the new Big Ten.
It is not.
So in the schedule that was put out, so again, you know, in the Big Ten East world, these two teams were in the Big Ten East together and played every year, obviously. The 5-year schedule that the Big Ten put out for 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, they're playing 3 out of 5 times. So Ohio State and Penn State will play in 24 and 25. They do not play in 2026 and 27. They will play again in 2028. Did you think this rivalry should have been protected in the new Big Ten?
Yeah, I was mad that it wasn't. I don't really understand the rationale for why it wasn't. Like it's 2 of your, even with the additions, it's 2 of your 5, I guess, like premier programs that have played incredible games like over the last decade. And I've played every year since Penn State was in the Big Ten. Like I thought this was a mistake to not protect this game.
So I would imagine, though, the people involved don't think that necessarily, because Penn State has no protected rivalries and the new Big Ten, and Ohio State only has Michigan. The tough part of this is, in a world where you're trying to get your best teams in the playoff, knowing that a 2-loss Big Ten team is really well positioned in a 12-team playoff, and a 3-loss Big Ten team, depending who the losses are and who the wins are, still has a chance. I do think it's a tough world for Ohio State to play Michigan and Penn State every year. And that Penn State, I think we're looking forward as much as anybody to sort of being freed up and not being in the same division and playing Ohio State and Michigan every year. And so I think Penn State wants its freedom to try to go 11-1 and not have to face this all the time. So it's a hard line to walk of. You want your best teams to play each other in the regular season as much as possible. But from a conference perspective, every time your best teams play each other, somebody has to lose. And I don't know that we believe that the College Football Playoff Committee is yet to the point, or ever will get to the point, where they're like, well, they did, they still are going to look at records to some degree. Mm-hmm. And playing Ohio State, Penn State every year guarantees somebody a loss.
Yeah, I get that. I think it just bothers me. I don't like Penn State celebrating the fact that it doesn't have any rivals. You should.
Yeah.
Yeah. I get it. If you're a program that geographically just doesn't make sense, then you don't have any rivals. Okay. I get that not everyone can have rivals, but Penn State has, we talked about earlier, Pitt and West Virginia in its backyard, and used to be regular games. And now this is going away too. And it's Penn State uses hashtag unrivaled and its stuff. And I'm just that's not fun. I would rather you play the teams that you are supposed to be rivals with, than avoiding them some years and cushioning your schedule to try to make the playoff.
When they say hashtag unrivaled, do they mean hashtag no rivals?
No, I don't think so. But now it's turned into that.
Okay.
because they don't have any.
So when you think about, and again, I think there's a balance here, right? You have to find regular season games that matter. As we said, Penn State is in the midst of a home-and-home with West Virginia in 23 and 24. Their 25 non-conference schedule stinks. Their 26 non-conference schedule stinks. Marshall, Temple, Buffalo. James Franklin has that in him, doesn't he?
Yeah.
He has it in him. Let's get 3 guaranteed wins. We don't care if they're boring games. They are playing Syracuse in 2027 and 2028, which again is our type of game. It's a northern game with some natural rivalry stuff there that's not in the same conference. I certainly, in a world where Penn State doesn't have this, could we do this? In a world where Penn State, unbelievably, how did we get here? Where Penn State, Pitt, and West Virginia are in 3 different conferences. Could you set up a 3-way schedule thing where 2 of them are playing each other every year, but you're not requiring them to play, right? That you're not, you're balancing it one way or another so that you're not requiring each team that, I guess it's only 3, so you can't do that because then somebody would have to play 2. But something. Could you do something where you are encouraged, where Penn State, Pitt, let's make this real. We can throw Syracuse is in the ACC. Who can we throw in? I guess it doesn't work with anybody else. Can we do this? Can we get a 3-team scheduling agreement between Penn State, Pitt, and West Virginia to play each other a lot?
Yeah. I think so. And could you do I don't know. I'm kind of with you maybe that you don't necessarily want to have them all 3 play each other every year. But could you I don't know, work a Youngstown State into it so that each team would have a little bit of a gimme and you play there's a 4-team showcase between Penn State, Pitt, West Virginia, and Youngstown State that you kind of cycle around, and then maybe that makes the power programs feel a little better about the agreement.
Yeah, there's something here. Let's make this happen. There's something here. You can get a 10-year cycle and do something. You get, let's figure this out. Because for Penn State, and the reason we're talking about this is in a world where Penn State does not have a Big Ten rival, lean into your non-conference rivals so that you're playing a rivalry game at least most years. And again, let Iowa State be we don't want to, because the thing is, when you get locked into a non-conference game every year, then it discourages you from playing major national non-conference games. But James Franklin's being is discouraging Penn State from doing that anyway. So let's not live in a world where they're playing Marshall, Temple, and Buffalo in 2026, or where there are 2 non-conference games right now for 2025 are Nevada and Villanova. Let's get out of that world, okay? You don't have to play Ohio State every year. Are you serious, by the way? Wait, let me look at this again. In 2026, they are not playing Ohio State, and their 3 non-conference games are Marshall, Temple, and Buffalo. They better go 12-0. It's not acceptable. Like, what are you waiting for? What do you like? What? That's not acceptable. All right, let's get on them. Holy War, Week 11, Holy War, awesome. BYU at Utah. This is absolutely the game this week. BYU and Utah were in the same conference between 1922 and 2010. It like made it easy. They were together. And then in 2011, Utah joins the Pac-12. BYU is independent. And now stuff gets a little hinky with the Holy War. This is as good of a in-state rivalry game as anywhere in the country. In 2014 and 15, and again, this is what you run up against. You're not in the same conference. And so it's like, well, it locks your schedule down. So in 2014 and 15, Utah says, we're not playing the Holy War because we want to play a non-conference series against Michigan. Okay, they take a 2-year break. 2022 and 23, they take another break because Utah wants to play Florida. And they're just like, we can't have this. But now they're back in the same conference again. Mm-hmm. So all the machinations, one of the best things that came out of all the realignment and all the unfortunate stuff that happened with the Pac-12, one of the nice things is that BYU and Utah are back in the same conference. They are back. They are in the Big 12 together now. The Big 12 only protected 4 rivalries that will be played every year. And this deservedly is one of the 4. The Holy War, they've played it more than 100 times, and it's back.
It's great. I love, like I mentioned earlier, like Utah playing Utah State and BYU in the same season, I think is awesome. This one, I mean, I don't know how good BYU is going to be this year. Like Utah's a team we both like to contend for the Big 12. I think we both picked them to win the Big 12 and make the playoff. So this is an important game for that. I don't know if it's necessarily a matchup of 2 teams that will be in contention for the Big 12 title. I don't have BYU like in that group of 4 or 5 teams I think that can actually win the league. But BYU can play spoiler here for sure. Like I think they're good enough to try to do that for Utah to try to derail their season. And I like too that it's not like we were talking not on the show a couple weeks ago, but like, is this going to be the last game of the season? And then like the Big 12 came out with a schedule kind of right after that. And on one level, it was like a little bit of a bummer that it's not in the last week of the season. But I also kind of like now, like thinking about it and sitting on a little more, like that it is removed from rivalry weekend so that we can all kind of maybe appreciate it and give it more of a spotlight. So I think I'm okay with that now.
You know who Utah's last game of the season that's against though?
Yeah.
Central Florida. It's like, we get it. It's like, hey, you don't want to get overwhelmed, but it's like Central Florida. Wow.
Classic Big 12 matchup. Salt Lake City and Orlando.
So, this was a no-doubter for Week 11. It's got to be BYU at Utah. Week 12 is also a Utah game. This was a little more difficult to try to figure out. We picked Utah at Colorado, the Rumble in the Rockies. It was the game that sort of was a year ender when they were both in the Pac-12 together. This is not protected in the new Big 12. Again, Colorado and Utah were both in the Pac-12. Now they're moving together to the Big 12 because their old conference exploded. So this is not as like long-term traditional. They didn't play between 1963 and 2010, but like it kind of started up again in like the new Pac-12 when they both joined. Utah had an 11-2 edge over Colorado. It's a nice game, and we kind of want to get to Colorado, see Deion Sanders and Shedeur Sanders up close, and this is a good opportunity to do it. You kind of made this choice. Why did you pick it?
For all the reasons you said. I think I made it with the caveat that like if Colorado's season kind of unravels on them, then maybe we don't do this game and we pivot to something else. But it's an interesting spot, I think, for Colorado to catch Utah in coming off of the Holy War, right? If Colorado has a little bit of a better season than it did last year, and like is a little more organized and a little more stout at some positions where they were deficient last year, then this is a game where I think they could do a lot of damage to Utah and Utah's quest to try to win the Big 12. So we'll see what Colorado becomes. And maybe we do end up coming off of this game and pivoting to something else. I also like this week. This week is the Rutgers-Maryland game, which does not have an official name, by the way, but I think it should. Like, do you want to call it the I-95 Classic? Do you want to call it the Amtrak Bowl?
Yeah, the NJ.com has really tried to, I think, make this happen. I think they had something with a railroad spike that they've tried, like that, like lean into the train thing.
Yeah,
that you can make trains cool. Doesn't have to be like the dining car game. Like, yeah.
Oh, I like the dining car game. Winner gets a big old omelet.
I mean, you should be able to get, like, Amtrak should sponsor the heck out of that. Like, I'm for two things. This is something I would like to do. I've had this on the back burner for me for a long time. There are multiple memorial stadiums in college football. Indiana's one, Nebraska's one, Illinois is one. Like, they're meaningless. Like, what are you memorializing? It's like, we're just in general, there's just stuff that deserves to be memorialized. And so we're doing that through Memorial Stadium. So I think that's terrible. And I just can't, if you are an Indiana fan or an Illinois fan or a Nebraska fan or a Memorial Stadium that I'm forgetting about, and you're outraged by the idea that I want to get rid of the names Memorial Stadium, let us know at @KOTNCFB. But you should either find something that actually matters to your program, right? If you want to name the Nebraska Stadium Osborne Stadium or Johnny Rogers Stadium or whatever, do it. In the Sioux, playing in the Sioux, the shoe in the Sioux. Oh man, big game in the Sioux. I'm there. Do it. But make it about your program or sell it. Sell it. Sell the names. Rutgers has had 50 different names for the stadium. Nobody knows what they are. Nobody cares, but they got some money. A generic name is worthless. So sell this rivalry name. The Amtrak game, I don't care. Like, it's nothing right now. Sell the Rutgers-Maryland game to somebody or come up with something cool. But an inability to be like, we couldn't figure it out. We'll just call it Rutgers versus Maryland. Stop. Really, this show is mostly about branding.
Do you know what New Jersey and Maryland both have? Wawa.
Make a call.
I'm there. I'm there for the Wawa Bowl.
Oh my God.
Winner gets a big goose.
Listen. What was the number one most exciting thing that people got fired up about? There are two things. There's two things that people got fired up about this college football season. Right? Mm-hmm. One was kind of old, which is dumping mayonnaise on a coach's head after the mayonnaise bowl. And the other one is consuming a Pop-Tart, a human Pop-Tart after the Pop-Tart bowl. It's all about branding. Do you know what kind of attention Tom Rinaldi would be like taking a train, eating a Wawa hoagie? They do a 7-minute segment on Maryland Rutgers, which is otherwise getting ignored. Branding, people. Now you want to go? If they name it the Wawa Bowl, we're dumping Utah, Colorado, right?
I'm kind of there already. Even if it's not the Wawa Bowl, I think we've talked ourselves into Maryland Rutgers.
Dion would understand.
Yeah.
I'm going to go see Dion, but yeah, he would understand. All right. Week 13 is Wisconsin at Nebraska, and we've got to get to Nebraska, and there are not a lot of great opportunities to get to Nebraska. They play a couple kind of lousy non-conference games. The good home games for Nebraska, they host Colorado in the non-conference, which was a good non-conference game last year when Colorado won that game. Their Big Ten games are Illinois, Rutgers, UCLA, and Wisconsin. That's kind of a light Big Ten home schedule for the Cornhuskers. So given that, this is the game to be there. And I like Luke Fickell versus Matt Rule. And again, just like we felt like we had to get to South Bend in year one of our road trip, I think we have to get to Lincoln.
I think we have to get to Lincoln too. I think it needs to be as much as you can when you're putting together a northern road trip schedule. I think Lincoln is a must stop, as long as it makes sense. And two interesting teams here. I mentioned the returning production earlier in the show. Wisconsin is 20th, which is pretty good. You know who's third?
Oh,
Nebraska.
Huskers? Really?
The Huskers are third with a little injection of Dylan Raiola.
Are you? What are you thinking? Just say it. What are you thinking the Cornhuskers could be this year?
I don't like a a bowl team, like a 7-8 win team, maybe.
Okay.
Like building toward something meaningful. They're not quite there yet, but I think a tangible step forward in Matt Rule's second year, which is what he's done everywhere else he's been.
Okay. I like it. Also this week, we're not acknowledging it, but also Alabama at Oklahoma is this week too. So like, who did a good job sprinkling in games that matter that they're going to blow up? The SEC with their new teams. Just saying. We want to learn as much as we're going to tell the South to cram it and mock the South. We also want to learn from the South in the few opportunities when they might present itself for anybody to learn from what the South is doing. I want to be clear on something that I put on our KOTN CFB Twitter account the other day. I saw somebody on Twitter say that they had opened a new Topgolf in Little Rock, Arkansas, and somebody fell and was caught in a net. And people know our dog mentality idea. And I tweeted it with hog mentality. But I mean, because it's in Arkansas, the Arkansas Razorbacks, the Hogs, right? I was not referencing any individual person. I would never do that. So I wanted to make that clear because my daughter immediately texted me, was like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "No, Razorbacks, like a hog call, like hog mentality."
I think I got that immediately.
Okay.
I think you're okay.
I'm not out here to take, I'm here to take down cultures and societies writ large, not individual people. We're just all doing the best we can. Right.
Yeah.
So, all right. The Hogs can cram it collectively, not individually. All right. So this is week 13. And again, there's like a handful. USC, UCLA, Big Ten banger. But again, we're going to have to talk out. We're going to get it, as much as I always say, like the best thing about college football is rules, right? That's what everybody loves. We're going to have to define, we're going to have to make some rules around this show. And we're going to have to talk out USC and UCLA at some point, whether we're going to like literally ignore them, that we're going to treat USC and UCLA the same way we're going to treat Georgia and Alabama, or whether we're going to be like, well, there's something. They didn't change their geography, but they decided to come hang out with us. So like they're the new kid who just moved in. Like maybe we show some grace and ask them to sit at the lunch table.
Maybe we'll see if they're cool. If they're cool, we'll consider it. You know what else is this week?
What's that?
Iowa State at Utah.
Oh, that's good. See, that's like I'm into that. And
I didn't realize this, but like so Utah has an off week, and then it's Holy War at Colorado, Iowa State. Like, that's a tough stretch. Yeah, we
could just send you to Utah for a month for that, and just give you an outpost out there. All right, the last one, week 14. It's what's that game? Oh yes, it's Michigan at Ohio State. And how, like, what potentially are the stakes here? Like how big? It feels like the Ohio State Michigan game has been gigantic for 3 straight years, but is it going to be gigantic-er?
Yes. Yeah, like the biggest anxiety bowl you've ever seen, I think, in Columbus for Ohio State fans. With Jim Harbaugh gone, Ohio State loaded for bear going for a national championship, Ryan Day looking to snap a 3-game losing streak against Michigan. Like you have to win. You have to win. There's like, and I saw like Dennis Dodd tweet this earlier in the week that like Bill O'Brien would be flirting with the Boston College job because he's afraid that Ohio State staff is going to get fired if they lose this game. And I don't think that's Bill O'Brien's motivation for being interested in the Boston College job at all. But I do think this is like, you better win this or else kind of game for Ryan Day. Like, obviously there's playoff stuff after that. We're in a new world. Ohio State can still lose to Michigan and go play for a national championship. But if that didn't happen, if the national championship thing doesn't happen and they lose this game, I would be very nervous if I were Ryan Day.
Yeah. I don't like, the stakes are almost too high. And like, it is odd, right? So one of the things that happens in any rivalry is like, do you feel like you're even, or do you feel like there's a favorite and an underdog in the game? And somehow, like, Michigan is the defending national champ, has won 3 straight, but Ohio State's going to be the favorite in this game because of everything that happened in the offseason, with everything Michigan lost and everything Ohio State kept and added. And we're going to be in this world where Michigan's going to feel like it has nothing to lose. The defending national champs are going to come in free and loose to Columbus, and Ohio State, coming off 3 straight losses to Michigan, is going to be like a 9.5-point favorite.
Yep.
And it's going to be really odd. And Like, I mean, new AD and Ross Bjork, new president and Ted Carter. Like, would you get up at the parade, like the national championship parade, and be like, we're here to celebrate Ohio State's national championship, but we also are announcing that we had to fire everybody because they did lose to Michigan? Where are we?
I don't know. I can't really comprehend that world. We're in it, and we'll have to get used to it. But it's weird.
So, because again, we've had 2 straight undefeated matchups in this series. Like, I don't think Michigan, with just the number of good players that they've lost, and B, the schedule they have, I don't think Michigan's going to be undefeated going into this game. Ohio State has to go to Oregon. Ohio State has to go to Penn State, right? I don't know that Ohio State's going to be undefeated. It is really going to matter. It's certainly going to have playoff implications, but like, that's not the point. The point is it's Ohio State, Michigan, and Michigan's won 3 in a row. So
that's right. Nothing else matters.
I'm almost, I'm not afraid, but I'm like, I almost like don't want to feed. It's like, yes, it matters. But like, man, it's almost too much. It's almost too much. I don't want fans to be sad on either side. I don't know. Okay. If we go out and back for every one of these 15 road trips, we're looking at 22,914 miles, as I said. If we just get in the car and go and stay, so that means that like when we go to like Washington, and we're going to be at Washington and Oregon in back-to-back weeks, so we drive to Washington, then we just stay. And then but instead of driving from Columbus to Washington, Washington to Columbus, Columbus to Eugene, like, right, we just stay. That shortens it down over 11,359 miles. I don't think we're going to get to all of them, but I would like to get to some of them. And we are certainly not at game day or big noon kickoff levels. But someday, Landis, will we be like at a come join the pregame KOT and tailgate level for some of these games?
Yeah, I'm just not putting on a mascot head. So I hope that I don't want anyone to expect that of me. You can do that if you want to, or we can bring somebody else in to put on a mascot head. But I'm not doing that. But otherwise, yeah, we'll get to the come hang out with this level. Yeah.
Oh my God, no! I am totally I wanted to put on the mascot head kind of guy, because again, some of these games, like, we want to be at games that like maybe wouldn't get that kind of national attention. But if we float up on a boat for Pitt at Cincinnati, then we can give them our KOT and attention.
Yeah.
This schedule would include 15 different stops. We did not repeat a place. So we went to 15 of our 26 stops. We did not go on our schedule. We did not pick to go to BYU, Iowa State, Northwestern, Illinois, Purdue, Iowa, Michigan State, Rutgers, Maryland, Boston College, or Syracuse. So we apologize for that. And there are 7 teams that we did not get to see at all in this schedule. We got to Ohio State and Michigan twice. We're going to see, Ohio State and Michigan, we're going to see 3 times each. And that's kind of like, I think that's probably fair, right? We're seeing Ohio State against Oregon, Penn State, and Michigan. It's like, okay, like that's, and we're seeing Michigan against Washington, Michigan State, and Ohio State. Like, that's kind of, those are the games that we want to be part of, games like that. So those are the 2 teams we're going to see 3 times. We're going to see 5 teams twice. Penn State, Nebraska, Wisconsin, Utah, and Pitt. We're going to see 12 teams once: Iowa, Washington, Minnesota, Oregon, Indiana, Cincinnati, West Virginia, Michigan State, Syracuse, BYU, Colorado, and Notre Dame. And then, by the way, we're catching 2 teams that aren't technically our northern teams, Bama and Louisville. That means there's 7 teams we're not seeing at all. And we apologize. Boston College, Iowa State, Northwestern, Purdue, Maryland, Rutgers, and Illinois. If we flop one of those games and get the Rutgers, Maryland, then we would not see Colorado, but we wouldn't, we are seeing Utah another time. In general, as people here on the YouTube show can look through our full schedules, what do you think, Landis? Is there something that we really are blowing it by not getting somewhere?
The only, I wish we could see everybody. The only team that we're not seeing that I think is maybe a little bit of a misstep, and a team that I would really want to see, is Iowa State. Because I think they have a real chance to win the Big 12. I think they're going to be a very interesting team this year. They are also very high on that returning production thing. I think actually they're second. They're second behind Virginia Tech in returning production this year. and it feels like they're on a little bit of an upward trajectory, and I think have a chance. Like when we get into the season, when we're ranking our northern teams, I think they have a chance to be a team that is on that list more often than not, and potentially quite high, depending on how things go. So I would like to see them. I think we're right in terms of like the spirit of the show, not going to the Cy-Hawk game and going to Pitt Cincinnati instead. But like that's the one week where I'm a little like, I could be swayed rather easily to go to the Cy-Hawk game instead. But otherwise, it's like, we can't get to everybody, and it's like, would I like to see David Braun in Northwestern? Sure. BC and whatever happens there with their head coach is going to be interesting. But Iowa State is a team that I think deserves some recognition that we're not necessarily hitting here.
And again, some good Northern games, as you said. Iowa State at Iowa in week 2. Iowa State does go to West Virginia on October 12th. Iowa State, again, the Kansas schools are border for us right now, but did you know Iowa State and Kansas are playing in Arrowhead Stadium in Kansas City this year?
Oh, I didn't know that. I had that down on my list of potential games. I did have that game, but I didn't know it was an Arrowhead. That is cool.
And you think about like the last 4 games for Iowa State are Kansas, Cincinnati, Utah, Kansas State. And again, like if we adopt Kansas and Kansas State, and the Iowa State Kansas State game last year was bonkers, but like we can't go to Iowa State Kansas State instead of Ohio State Michigan. So like that's one of those. Like we held off on a Columbus visit until the last weekend of the year. So that's our Northern schedule. We hope to actually do some of them, and if we do, we'll let you guys know, and hopefully we'll see you out there, you kings and queens and princes and princesses of the North. We're just excited about what's to come, and we wanted to get you guys excited about that there are like awesome games ahead, and it's one of those where there's plenty of time to talk about labor relations boards, but sometimes, Landis, it's just better to talk ball.
I think it's always better to talk ball. I will always lean on the side of talking ball. We'll talk about the other stuff that is important and it's serious, and we're not trying to be flippant about it, but I'm always willing to talk ball.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks to Mike Urostowski, our producer, who makes us look good and sound good. Again, coming up later this week, we'll be talking about Northern college football players who are now taking part in the Super Bowl for the San Francisco 49ers and the Kansas City Chiefs. We'll run through the numbers on that, but more interestingly, we'll tell stories about that. We're going to hear from some of the people who covered these guys in college, what they thought they might turn out to be and what they have turned out to be. And so we'll welcome you to that show. Plenty more planned on Kings of the North. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe on YouTube. And mostly, thanks for being here. And if you would, spread the word. For Bill Landis, I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was Kings of the North.